It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm Paul Gustafson. I'm here with my co-host, Rick Morris. And Rick, I'm super pumped today. We've got a great discussion. How are you doing, man?
Doing good. I'm going to make fun of you just because that's who we are. We've been doing this. How many? Now we got this season 4. We've got easily 100 episodes, right? Easily 100. Yeah, because we did like 114 episodes as season 1, right? Before we got smart and started doing this. And everyone, go ahead.
I think about 140, 150 now, maybe.
Somewhere around there. Yeah. And everyone knows that I edited the show and put it together. And not one time have you done the count in where I can actually not have to strike it. Yeah. It's 3, 2, pause, and then we go. And it's always a challenge.
What am I doing, man? Tell me.
You're just funny. I'm. You know what I'll do? Because we want to do a bloopers reel, and we've got dandies. If we rolled out the Mike Harper bloopers, those would be the best. And I'm picking on you, Mike, just in case you're listed there. It's different every time. It's funny. Yeah, it's not even a thing. I like to just poke at you because I can. And we're waking up, and this is how we get our brains going. That's what we do.
Yeah, we're waking up, man. So we've got a fun topic today. You picked this, and I love it. So why don't you share with everybody what we're going to talk about?
Well, so we started the last episode. We talked about how to become an author, how to write a book, and I really decided to become an author with something else in mind, which is I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to speak. When I made the decision to write the book, it was so that the book could propel me to stage. And so I thought we would continue that and share our stories and kind of how to get onto the speaking circuit. There's tons of stuff that's out there. I know I get inundated with like, if you want to be a speaker, here's the steps. And I think it's just always important for us to share our stories. Like, how did we do that? How did we get to our first stage? What was that like? And then how do we build that up? And then what are some of the things we wish we knew when we started? Like things that I know now to do and put into my contracts and that kind of stuff. But I really wish I would have known. And we'll answer the biggest one. How do we negotiate for what rate do we get? I think a lot of people want to know, like, how do you know how much you're worth? How do you know what to ask for in speaking in and of itself? So I think that's what we should do today, Paul.
Let's do it. That's a wide breadth of different topics here related to that. And I think it's good. So let's start with those stories. I want to hear from you first, and I'll share you my story of speaking. But what was that for you? What was that first story of wanting to take the stage and share a message?
Yeah, I set my intention. I want to say it was like 90. It was 96, 97. I was at GE. And I was rising up the chain. I kind of hit the level that I was going to be at, and I was getting an opportunity to go to Xerox. And I told my bosses then, almost in a Freudian way, that like I wanted to get bigger and possibly get on stage, is why I'm making this move. And what I was doing at that time was collecting knowledge. So if you announce kind of that intent that I want to speak, a lot of people go, well, I don't know what I would say. So let me answer that concern first. Almost everything's been said. I truly believe almost every great thing has been said. It's just not been said by you to your audience, to people who would want to listen to you. And everybody has an audience, whether it's your children, your friends, whatever, everybody's got an audience. So I don't care if it's been said before. It hasn't been said your way with your personal story to your audience. But when I announced that intention going to Xerox, I was going with the intention that I wanted to collect stories. So I kind of knew that like things that were going to happen, key things that were said, key negotiation points, little problems with team members that we were able to resolve. Like I started with an intention to write those down to be able to tell the story. And I started my habit at that point of at the end of every project, I look back and I write those stories down, even the little minuscule things. There's several stories that I have that were so minor, but they have such a great point that they're referencing. It doesn't matter, right? So I mean, I literally write down like, I I remember this conflict. I remember when I was angry and how I turned that around. It's just journaling as you go, but I do a synopsis of every project and I store that away. And I always put next to it, I shared with people for the book, like, here's my quote, here's my personal story. This is the point I want to make, right? My formula. But I just start storing that away because I never know when I want to come back to it. Yeah. So I announced that intention to Xerox. I started to collect knowledge. And then I went through Toastmasters. And then I just started volunteering to speak. And it started with PMI, the Project Management Institute, in the Birmingham chapter. So I started making small presentations there, trying some stuff out. And then I became the vice president of programs, where I saw Neil Witten do his thing. And that's where I was like, okay, PMI is going to be my vehicle. Like I saw the finances of what he did, how he pulled it off, all that stuff, because I was part of his negotiation stream to get him into my chapter. And that's where I set the intention and said, okay, I think Project Management Institute is going to be my vehicle. And I started to focus on them. So I'm going to pause there because that's my beginning story, right? I announced the intention years before, collected stories, found a local place that I was involved with, a local chapter of something I was involved with, and started to speak there. Was kind of how I started to make this dream come true for me. What about you, Paul? Where's your story begin?
Yeah, lots of things trigger off that. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to encourage all our listeners, viewers, if you have a passion of something, write it down, capture the things that you're passionate about, that you have some strengths in, because you have a message to share to others. That passion and those strengths, that might be the prompt for you to share a message. And so what Rick's sharing is really powerful. Then you can start to see the opportunities that you have. So for me, Rick, there's two elements. I'll make these brief. The first one was, I was at, when I was working, I don't know, probably I was 28, 29 years old, maybe even 27, somewhere around that age, just had a newborn. Somebody had registered me for a Franklin Covey conference. And I'm like, okay, it was about time management. I can't even remember what it was. But I remember the speaker. And I was like, wow, this guy's about my age, maybe a year or two older. He's really good. And so I'm listening. He's engaging. And then I realized he had a little trick that was really powerful. He would ask the audience questions, but he wouldn't just ask the audience. He'd ask somebody in the audience. And on one of those questions, I was the one he asked. First, he said, anybody have children? A bunch of hands go up. He looks at me, he goes, sir, you said you have a child. How old's your child? She's 6 months. Oh, wow, that's awesome. Now, let me ask you a question. What's your name? Paul. Paul, if your child, and he at that point, he knew his name. If your child, Michael, if there was a tightrope between two buildings and for whatever reason, he crawled on that tightrope across, and then you realize later, like, oh my gosh, he's over there. Would you run on that tightrope after him? Or would you hold back? I said, I'd go after him right away. Now, he had set that up like, how many of you guys would walk across the tightrope and nobody would raise their hand? But when he added the son, my son, to the picture, all of a sudden, I wanted to run across the tightrope. Now, I tell that little story. That was really powerful, and that was an impactful day. But I realized the power of a good communicator. And I wanted that for myself. I'm still a work in progress, Rick, and that's, I think, the key to being a good speaker is realize that you got to always hone that craft. You got to keep working it. So for me, after that, what I did was, the rest of the story was, you know what? I'm passionate about this area of, in this case, it was modeling and simulation, what I was doing in that area, that domain. And there were some opportunities for me to speak. So I wrote some white papers, very short, 8-page, 10-page papers on a topic. And it gave me an opportunity, a platform to speak at several conferences, started in Orlando, but it's been worldwide. I've gone to France, I've been to Prague, different places to speak. And it started really with that communicator that I was able to witness firsthand, realizing I want that. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to be an effective communicator, and I want to share things that I'm passionate about. So that's how it started with me, man.
That's awesome, dude. No, and you actually triggered when I was younger, before I was really even in this professional track, my brother got me involved in one of these multi-level marketing, companies. It was Niken, the one that did magnets. And to move up the chain, you had to go get silver certified. When you do, there's these speakers. And there was a guy that hit stage. And that's why I was like, even that just triggering me back, it actually goes back further for me because I was like, man, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Like I want to come in and fire up a room like that. That's awesome. And so I remember talking to him afterwards, telling him I want to do what he does. So it was for a while for me that I was on that track. But so now I want to get started. And the biggest thing is, I had a couple of speeches and I put a couple of things together, but I did those for my local chapter. And then I just took the jump and said, I'm going to do something. So I started looking at Project Management Institute, and I noticed that, there's 300 some odd chapters all over the world. Each one of them has a monthly speaker. So there's 12 opportunities at every single chapter, and they have a professional development day. So I just started looking at that, and they almost all have calls for speakers. So I started filling some of those out, and Tampa, Florida was the first one that was a professional development day. I put in for it and I got it. Wow. And they said, look, you're kind of like one of the last ones. You're unknown. We'll pay your expenses, but there won't be any fee for it. And I was like, yes, let's go. Like I would, do anything to get that stage. I remember taking my whole family down there and looking at my now ex-wife. I looked at her and I was like, I'm going to go do this. Like I'm going to go do this thing. And if it goes great, awesome. Then I'm on this path. I know I'm on the right path. But if it doesn't, then, I gave it the old college try. Okay. I went and tried, whatever. Still to this day, Paul, I've not had an audience react to my material like that audience did in that room. It was insane. I don't know, sometimes just everything comes together. And like, I was in just a really, really solid mood. It was right after lunch. They had been dying for any kind of excitement. And I played a couple of things, and these were just my natural thoughts, but these are really good tricks for people. The first thing you want to do on any speech is raise the energy of the room.
Yeah. You
want to raise that energy. Well, when you're starting at these business conferences, it's very difficult to do that. And this was a spur of the moment thing, Paul. And I do it now in all my speeches, but it was just the thought as they came in. I said, first of all, I said there was like 12 sessions going on at the same time. Yeah. I said, so the first thing I want y'all to do is just give yourselves a round of applause for choosing this session, right? And they did. I was like, I want to hear. I said, I want it to be so loud that all the other people go, what's going on in that room? Because we're going to have some fun in here, right? And they did, right? And we were hooting and hollering. Well, when I hit my first 2 or 3 jokes, they had such high energy. It just came, like they went nuts. To the point that there's a guy, Frank Salidas, is still a very dear friend of mine, but he had been, this was probably his 600th PMI. I mean, he's been all over, done everything. He stopped his speech in his room to come in over to our room to see who's in there, what's going on in there, and then came back and finished his speech, and we became friends on that. But my point is the first thing to remember is it's about them. It's not about you and your information. It's about them and making sure you're entertaining them as well as giving them the knowledge that you're going for. So I remember coming out of that, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I still have people that are friends that were in that room that day that still tell me that it was more them than it was me, but we all that was the room. And I've been chasing that feeling ever since, Paul. That was my first high in speaking. And like, I've been chasing it ever since.
That's awesome, man. I love that story. And to be honest with you, it reminds me of the times where I spoke and I didn't bring the energy.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, guys, I had one person tell me, and I try to remind myself not to do this. Sometimes I can come across monotone, right? I don't have enough flex in my voice or whatever it is. And so it's not coming across strong enough. And maybe it's not coming across confident enough, even though I may be confident about what I'm speaking. So I'm trying, continue. Like I said earlier, I'm a work in progress. We all are. But I remember some of those early talks, right? So here it is. I want to do it. I go down to Orlando. I've written this. I've put all my energy in writing this great paper. Now I have to present it. Now I get to speak on it. So I'm at the hotel. You may remember this. It's the Holiday Inn on International Drive. They call it the Tower.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that's where I'm at. Not far from, you probably worked at the Olive Garden. I think you told me.
No. So if you're talking about the circular one, which used to be a La Quinta and then it turned into a Holiday Inn, it's the circular one.
It was the square one.
Okay, the square. Yeah. So right near Wet and Wild, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was at the Bennigan's
right across
next
from
to Wet and
Bennigan's.
Wild. Yep. So Bennigan's is where I was at. Yep.
I'll get Bennigan's. Yeah. Yeah. So there I am. I'm just doing the mirror. I'm doing the mirror thing, right? I'm rehearsing in front of the mirror. And I'm just trying to work through it. I've got my notes on a 3x5 card, and man, I'm sweating bullets. This is my first big speech, and I've got no supporting cast around me. I'm solo on this one, baby. Now there's going to be a lot of people in the room. There was a good introduction and all that. So I get up there and I fumbled through it, but you know what? I got it done. And it gave me, I did okay. It was the Q&A where I messed up. I think I wasn't ready. I had all my notes ready, and then the questions started coming. There was like 3 or 4, and I couldn't quite get the answer down. Like all of a sudden the quality of what I just presented dropped significantly because my Q&A ability was off. So that was the realization for that. I was like, ooh, I better be ready for some of these questions. I should know what these questions are. Yeah. Maybe I can find a way to kind of prompt the questions, because if I learn how to prompt the questions, then I'll know what the answer is and I'll be ready for it. So that's one of the secret tips here as far as speaking, I think, is be prepared with whatever potential questions are. If you were in the audience, what question would you ask? And be ready to answer it. And to prompt them, I don't want to hear your thoughts on this. To prompt them, maybe drop it in there. I know what many of you might be thinking. One of the questions that I think I was dealing with is such and such, and you kind of lay it out. And there's different ways to do it, but yeah. So I'll stop there. I'll pause. I'll let you comment, because then I want to carry on to some of the other stories that happened after that.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question. I was going to come in there and ask the question, how do you prompt? So how I prompt is I start a bit of a story. Yeah. Or I'll say something like, even something mundane. Like, so if my goal is I want to talk about project portfolio management systems and which one's the best in the market, right? So my intent for being up there in speech is to sell without selling, right? I'll say, look, I've got 150 implementations. I'm happy to discuss any of that. If anybody's got any questions, you can let me know, or we can save her for Q&A. And I blow right on by it. But I've just injected in there for somebody to ask me a question about that. And they will. You're suggesting it. And so when you know that there's something that you want to like be asked, but you don't want to offer it on stage, that's how you can prompt it out. And then they'll ask you at the end, and it gives you the opportunity to tell the story, but you were asked, you weren't, so it's a really good way to prompt.
Yeah. And recognize when somebody asks you a question, if you're speaking and they ask you a question, that's actually a good sign. Because when I remember that first talk, I was getting the questions. I'm like, oh no, I really messed up. They don't agree with what I'm saying. Actually, they probably were agreeing with what I was saying, and they were so engaged with what I said that they had a question to ask. If they don't ask a question, that means you weren't very engaging as a speaker.
Right.
So I had to learn that lesson the hard way. But I love your approach. I think that's really good. Recognizing that, hey, time's limited, guys. I wish we had more time to cover this. Maybe we can cover this in Q&A if you have a question. But here, there's 3 different ways to be able to support this. I'm going to focus on one later. So you said there's 3 different ways. What are some of the other ways that somebody might be able to handle that or do that? Different ways to prompt. Think through it ahead of time. Remember, I think you said it. You're not speaking for you. You're speaking for your audience. You're communicating to them. Remember them, and then put yourself in a position as an audience member to think about, okay, what's the questions they might be asking? What are they thinking through? What do I need to be ready to respond to? How do I prompt them to be able to, get to that question? Because I want to provide it to them.
So I want to pivot and get into your worst feeling on stage, like the time that like you were just up there and you just knew it was the worst. I'll share mine. Book had come out. I'm probably in my 35th or 40th speech in support of the book, and had been just slaying audiences. This is my second book that had come out, just slaying audiences with jokes and all this other stuff, and got just really complacent, got almost cocky in the delivery of it, and was invited to speak internationally, and was so excited. I got, in fact, instead of a fee, they gave me a week vacation in Brazil and Copacabana Beach and all this stuff. And I mean, I was living it up on the beach. It was amazing, right? I was really enjoying it. And so now it's time to go deliver this speech. I'm being translated, which is, you have to learn how to, I speak so fast too. So you have to learn how to slow your tone down and take inordinate amount of pauses, because you got to let the translator catch up and take a breath before you start moving in your next thing. And so I'm ready to lay that first joke down that just always gets the audience warmed up, and it's just crickets, Paul, like just nothing. And I'm like, okay, all right, so we just got to wake them up a little bit. So I start ad-libbing a little bit. I'm just throwing joke after joke after joke, and nothing is landing. I mean, and I'm like, wow, there's even that point in the speech. I was like, this audience sucks, man. You know what I mean? Like it's so them. And I just bombed, and it was the worst feeling, because it was a friend of mine that brought me over there. They're the ones that helped arrange this vacation, took great care of me and my family while we were there. And I realized that I did not do the research for the audience. All of my jokes and all of my references had American connotation, had references to American game shows, or stuff, and to children's games. But those children's games aren't international. They were children's games in the States. And so I did not do any research on how to connect that same joke to the culture and to my audience. And that was a huge lesson learned that I never made again. But boy, yeah, it was one of the most uncomfortable feelings. And I remember coming off that stage, Paul, and even still a little bit of me was like, they suck. And that next guy gets up there and he just slays them. And they'd been sitting there for an hour dying for somebody to make them laugh or do something. So this guy here, I don't think was even that funny, but boy, he had them, because it connected with them again. So that was a horrible feeling as a speaker.
Oh yeah. I've had horrible feelings too. It happens, guys. So first of all, if you ever experience this, like, that little letdown, the worst critic is going to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So recognize that you're probably going to beat yourself up, and you maybe you weren't as bad as you think you were. You weren't.
On that one, remember, Paul, I was absolutely as bad as I thought I was. But go ahead.
Well, I know you though, so you probably knew that you weren't playing to your A game, but you're still really good.
No, I appreciate that.
So and that's true for any speaker. I would just encourage you, don't try to beat yourself up. If you're going to beat yourself up before you speak. Yeah. Before you speak, get a murder board team. This is what I ended up doing. After a couple years, I'm getting real comfortable on stage now, right? And that's part of it. When you speak the first time, you may not be that confident, but over time, if you keep doing it, it's like, you know what? The stage gets kind of comfortable. That mic feels good to hold, right? In fact, I always prefer holding a mic if I could. I just felt more empowered, right? No. When it was, the mic that's sitting on the podium, I don't know, it kind of felt awkward a little bit. And then they brought these little mics here. Those are kind of cool. You look kind of wonky, but it's better once you're mic'd up. That helps with the confidence. But I started to get a team together beforehand. I realized, okay, I need to work on this. And I thought I was good. So I had my friend Larry and a couple others. I'll tell this story really quick. So he says, Paul, why don't you give your presentation here? Again, back at this is the same Holiday Inn 3 years later. And I don't know how many times I spoke at that place. So I'm like, Larry, I'll just run through this. It's fine. It's good. So he says, no, Paul, look, you're missing an opportunity here with the audience. And so he worked me until it was 1 a.m. He says, all right, finally I got it. Now there was 4 other people in there. I had Steve, Larry, Tram. They were all in there helping out. And, it was tough. That was really, really hard. But the next day when it was my turn, man, I was ready to go. I connected with that audience. That was the number one thing you have to do. Find a way to connect with the audience right away. take if you're following a speaker, what was that speaker that just presented or provided a message? What was it? Capture a nugget or two off that. Compliment what just happened. Maybe there's a great question that was asked by the audience. Remember, you are serving the audience. So if a question came up by the audience, it was a good discussion that took place, do something with that, leverage that. That's a good way to kind of set the tone. So what I would do is, I remember that speech. This is kind of like the moment where I felt like I became a true speaker was when Larry, on the murder board had me go through that whole thing. The next day I step up, I say something to really connect with the audience, something like, man, I really enjoyed that last presentation. I think the topic that we're talking about here on, simulation interoperability or something, that element of what we just spoke about is so key. And I want to pull in on that just a little bit further in my talk, and then I'd ask a question. The very first thing after that would be a question. And I forget what the question was, but I threw that question out there and I pull them in. When you ask a question, it becomes two ways. It's not just monotone anymore. It's not just one person sharing a message. Now you're interacting. It was just like that Franklin Covey guy asking the audience, hey, would you go up on a tightrope if you had a line between two buildings? Would you do that? No. How many of you had children? You. Would you, if your child went out there, would you go out and get them? Yeah, absolutely. Right. So there was an engagement. That's so important. So I think that's what helped me. And, but yeah, there's some crash and burn experiences I think that we all have. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not, crash and burn, but I can remember getting feedback for the first time, the surveys at the end.
Yeah.
And, I was in a room, I had probably 3,000 people in the room, and there was two pieces of feedback that was really negative. Right. And so I got a ton of great feedback. Right. And I didn't focus on that. I focused on the negative. And, it bothered me. It was like, I don't think I said it that way. I don't feel that way and that kind of stuff. And I had one of my mentors go, if everybody liked you, you didn't challenge them enough in the speech. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What I mean? Like if you don't say something that makes people uncomfortable, and some people just don't like to be uncomfortable and I'll call that negative, then you're not challenging the thought enough. You're just agreeing with everybody. And that's a waste of an hour. And I was like, oh, that's it. So it turned in my head that it became the game, because there's always going to be somebody in that room who just hates me, Paul. They just hate everything that I do. And that's okay. And now my game is I try to find and connect with that person in the room. So as I'm scanning the room and trying to make it personal, I'm looking at each person, looking for which one of you is the one that hates me, because I'm going to connect here. We're going to have fun. But it just helped me change that in my brain a little bit. You know what I mean? That negative feedback's a good thing. And it is something that you should take in and understand. I used to get in trouble a lot early on with my wit, because some of my more funnier things are things that weren't planned to be said. However, I was a little edgy with some of the things I said, and I could tone that language down. I could still be witful and I could still be edgy, but I'd always end up saying a word that offended somebody or something like that. Or, you know what I mean? Like not intent, not that I cussed or anything or used any derogatory terms. It's just like, it came out a little loose, almost like I was with friends, at a dinner or something like that. Yeah. And so I had to learn how to keep that professional, but still let that wit go. And I learned that from that negative feedback. So it's not always, obviously you want to be respected and loved, but I really start to focus now on what that opportunity to get better is going to be, what that negative feedback is. And then it changes, right? Because then I fix that and inevitably do something else. So there's always going to be something that I did that somebody's not going to like. And I think that's important to know going into it, so that when you're doing your first speech and you get that negative feedback, that's great. Let's own that and move to the next step.
Yeah. So this is really important. I mean, we're going to get feedback, and sometimes we're not going to like what we see and what we read. And the truth of it is, as humans, we want positive feedback. We want to make sure that we've connected with the audience. But when you get that negative feedback, and I have, Rick, it's tough. It's tough to read, and I beat myself up, and I won't sleep. I'll stay up a little bit late thinking about not the positive, but, with that one comment that I may have gotten. And it's not healthy to do that. But what I realized later is, first of all, you don't know the state of what that audience member was before you spoke. They may have had a bad lunch. Maybe their meal never came. Maybe something happened. Maybe they didn't get the rental car that they want, whatever. You don't know their scenario. And so they're coming in with a foundation of negativity to start, and they're just adding to it, right? So they're if it's a flame question, like they're flaming you for something, it's probably there's something else that triggered it. What's the real why behind it? Because if it doesn't have merit, the question and the feedback that you have, and you realize, wait a minute, that's not what I said, or that's not what I presented, then you realize, well, wait a minute, there was something else off. It wasn't necessarily me. But you still can take that information and you can leverage and use it. And maybe it'll create a great story for you to use later. So you can take some of that feedback and say, hey, one of the comments that we got on this was such and such, even though it may have been false. And then you can pull on that and you can refute that comment right away. So, you hit it, right? So there's those elements that, it's not going to be 100%. Here's the other thing, Rick. I want to get into this topic. Too much information.
Oof.
All right. So I'm going to pause there because I just set the table there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on too much information?
It's 3 points and a ring of glory. That's it. I mean, it depends on how many. If it's a 15 to 20 minute speech, it's 1 point. If it's 20 to 45, it's 2 points. 45 to 60, it's 3 points that they're going to remember. That's it. It doesn't matter how much information you give them. That's all they're going to remember. So make it memorable. And so the people that pack their slides and read the slides, like I love, Seth Godin, the way he does it. It's just a bunch of pictures, and those pictures really just kind of divert your attention from the story, but they're hilarious. My slides are boring, Paul. Like I love when people are like, can I have your slides? Like, if you want them, because mine are like bullet points, and they're just triggering me to start talking about this story. A story I know, a story I've rehearsed, but it's my reminder that this is the story I want to tell. And it's just a couple of pieces, but I don't put a lot of stuff in words and, a lot of that kind of stuff on the slides and things that distract attention. But I think 3 points is the key. The people that try to pack as much as they can, I think Roddy Galbraith does a really, really good job of this when he starts talking about how John Maxwell lays out his speeches, and there's personal story, key point, and all that stuff, and he ends up building a slide where it's just all key point, and that's the way most people think. You got to remember less is more on your key points, but more stories and more things to connect to that point to reinforce it. But those 3 key points is all they're going to remember and take away.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the most important thing. You mentioned something about story. That is critical. And I can go back and rewind the tape and think back through some of the speeches that I wish I could redo. And I was missing story. I was kind of chasing right into points, then the second point, then the third point. And I'm like, I was probably overloading them. And you're trying to pack it in. You got a certain amount of time, and you're speed dating through your slide deck, and your slide deck becomes the most important element. Like, I got to get through all my slides. No, the slide deck's not important. It's the audience. So I remember I was at an event called ITSEC, Industry Inter-Service Training, Simulation, and Education Conference, again, in Orlando at the big convention center. The room's packed. Now, we had a dry run the day before. They really want you to make sure your slides work, that your mic works, and you're happy. And I remember going in there, and everything was great. I go in there just before I'm supposed to speak, the other speaker, and I'm like, there's a problem here. They've got the projector super bright. You can see it. They got the room dark as can be, and there's no light on the speaker. No light on the speaker at all. And I'm like, this is not good. So I adjusted. I talked to the chairperson for there as I was coming out. I was like, is there any way that we can just turn on the house lights here, and that way we can really focus in on it? Because otherwise they were just going to look at that PowerPoint. And I didn't want them just to look at the PowerPoint. It wasn't that I wanted them to look at me. I just wanted to be able to connect with the audience because I needed to see the audience to connect. I have to see their eyes. And I actually used a couple props in that speech, and it was very effective, but I had to change the room. And that was an effective talk. But to be honest with you, I had overdone PowerPoints before that. Prior speeches, I'd try to put all the animation in there and lots of bullet points, and whew, you've seen those kind of speeches before.
Have you seen I can't remember the comedian's name, but if you just search Death by PowerPoint, he does such a great job of explaining all of the mistakes people make with PowerPoint. He's Dan McMillan, that's his name. He's a comedian. Really, really funny. I use that. I always use video when I'm doing a full day seminar. I always use silly videos that I can build something off of, but I always start with a video. So first, they don't want to miss the joke. They don't want to miss the funny. So it brings them back from break really fast, but it also quiets the room and gets them to focus on something for 30 seconds to a minute and a half. Yeah. And then I've got that room controlled again to be able to go into my talk. But yeah, I use that Dan McMillan Death by PowerPoint. Yeah, find it on YouTube. It's really, really funny.
I will. I'll check it out. Yeah.
So let me pivot into a really important topic here. And I want to get your take first as well. So now you've put yourself out there. There's a speech. You've connected with the people. It looks good. And they come back to you and they go, okay, Paul, what's your rate? This is where most people freak out. So Paul, I just asked you, what's your rate? Go.
Okay. So I always have to look at the venue itself, right? So part of this, a lot of the talks that I've had to do from a technical standpoint, somebody else is paying for me. Right. So I have a customer that's paying for my travel, paying for my labor, all those things. So I need to make sure that those are built into it. The fee, the rate. So if you're an independent speaker and someone's paying for it, know what your costs are. What are your costs? And find out what the like the travel costs are going to be. Make sure you're clear. Say, hey guys. First of all, like Borland, I spoke at Borland. You ever heard of Borland?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I spoke several times there. And the way that they work for their developers conferences was they had a stipend. So you have to inquire about what that is. So I had to ask, okay, what's the stipend for this? Because if you don't ask, you may not get.
Yeah.
So start with that. What's the stipend that you have for speakers? I need to be able to cover my costs for travel, hotel stay, and so forth. Now, recognize the platform that you're given. Sometimes you may be it may be an opportunity for you to be able to speak at an event where you can almost do it in gratis, but you still want that stipend to go there, because that's a great platform to be at. But don't ask for nothing, right? Otherwise. Like I spoke a couple of years ago in Ohio, and they asked that same question, just like you did. What's your rate? And I gave it to them. I said, well, here's for travel and the amount of time that I'm there, this is my fee. It was at that point, it was $2,500. All right. It's kind of low, but that's what it was. And I stuck with it, and that's how it worked out for me. So, and it was, what I anticipated with that was some more discussion with them, and there really wasn't. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes they're like, okay, that's fine, that's great. And I'm like, maybe
I left it on the table. Yeah.
Maybe I should ask for more. So what I realized after that one a few years ago was, what do you really want? And what's holding you back from saying it? So if it was $4,000, which I probably should have said, I should have said it. And if they wanted to come down a little bit, like, oh man, we just don't have a budget for that, would 3,200 work, or whatever it would have been? Then we would have found a happy medium to make that happen. So anyway.
So you just hit it on the key for me. I have the same discussion, regardless of venue or anything else. And there's a way to do this. It's in being integrous as well. So a lot of people will say, well, I normally make. And if somebody says that to me, I normally make this, then my question is, well, show me the contract that had that on it, and we'll see what we can do. So I've changed the way I say it is I normally ask for, because I'm being integrous because I'm turning around and asking you for that amount. But I always say a pretty exorbitant number, because one, I want them to know that I feel I'm worth it, right? Because if you hem and haw and go maybe $200, then people start to think maybe you're not worth it. So I always say I normally ask for 7,500 to 10,000. But the next thing I do then is pivot, depending on how bad I want that engagement. I'll pivot and compliment them. So I'll say I normally ask for 7,500 to 10,000, but I've always really supported the Project Management Institute. You guys gave me my break. I understand you're a nonprofit and you probably can't swing something like that. So why don't you come up with a budget and I'll see if I can make that work.
Yeah.
So I turn around and put it back to them. I can't tell you how many times I would have taken way less than what I got to go do that speech. Mm-hmm. But at this point, that's what they felt I was worth, and I accepted it. So there was one, when I first started, there was one chapter I spoke at for like $500 2 years before. In doing that, they offered me $4,000. And I was like, sure. And it was a drive. Like I could drive it in 3 hours, do the speech, be home that night. Like there was really that much to it. But the point being is let them set that value, but don't undersell yourself. So if you say, I normally ask for X, but I really, believe in this organization, I really like your members, I really want to be on the stage, whatever that may be, what would be worth it for you? Let them pitch a number. And then honestly, if that works for you, grab it. If it doesn't, then say, I'm sorry, I can't do it for that. And that's a way to, because people are trying to figure out, well, how do I value myself? And everybody always tends to undervalue themselves. I know a few people that overvalue, right? But most people undervalue what they're worth. And that would be my suggestion, Paul.
Yeah, this is a really good topic. I mean, because this is the area that I think both sides are uncomfortable with.
Of course.
The speaker and the event coordinator. They want you to speak there, the event coordinator, and the speaker wants to speak there. There's no question about it. And there's this, it's the elephant in the room, but nobody wants to talk about it. So if you can, hopefully, let's say you're the speaker in this example, you can say, well, look, I would love to do it. My time is limited. I normally charge X, just like you said.
Ask. You don't charge, because then you have to prove you've charged it.
Yeah, I appreciate that point, because that's not. Here I am. I'm in this business world, and I get stuck in the vernacular too. I normally ask. I like that. I'm going to use that. I normally ask for whatever it is, and then if you feel like there's a discount that you can offer, to say, look, I'm willing to work a deal. I like how you said it, because you put it back in their lap. You're not giving them the number.
Right.
They need to come up with a number. They know what your value's worth. And that's really the point of what you said. Know your value, share your value, allow the other person to understand what that value is, but let them come up with, a value that works for them based on their budget.
Yeah, I just accepted one. It's $1,500. It's a 45-minute drive. And it's a really cool audience, right? And the person who booked it is somebody that I know, and I really want to propel them. So what I'll even do in my invoice in that is I'll still invoice at 7,500, and then I'll show the discount to that amount. So now I have come back, and so that's how I stay integrous in that ask, and I can show that I have charged that, but I've taken less. But they also, from a psychology perspective, feel like they got a bargain. So they feel like we've got a $7,500 speaker that we got for $4,000. So they're excited, and it does change that tone a little bit. Versus if they think you're worth 1,000 and you pushed them to 1,500, then they're sitting there going, boy, this guy better bring it. You know what I mean? There's a small psychology shift there, but then they're the ones that have to come up with a number, and then you can decide. And I've walked away. I'm sitting there going, that's not worth it for me to come do it for that. But I really appreciate the offer, and they've come back sometimes and said, well, what would make it? And I still put it back on them, Paul. I go, more than that, but I appreciate it. and I've had people come back and go, well, and like double it. And like, well, what about this? And I'll go, listen, it sounds like you really want me there. I really appreciate you stepping outside that comfort zone. So yeah, I'll come in and do that for you. So it really is, though, a decision point of, is that valuable enough for me to travel and take time away and to do all the prep and everything I want to do for that speech? But it's just a great way to put it back on them, let them set the value. And then, you're the one that can gracefully say no, but you didn't throw some outlandish figure and, that you were afraid of. It's just been the way that I've settled in. So we've given a ton of information here, but what about a tip and challenge, Paul? Lead us off on that. If you want to become a speaker, if you want to start down this path, what's a tip and what's a challenge?
Yeah, this is such a great discussion. We could probably go, for another 20 minutes on this topic, but I just want to encourage everybody. If you're watching this or listening to this, you have a message to share. The world needs to hear what it is that you have to share, and don't be afraid of taking that step and offering a message to somebody else. And we just talked about landing an opportunity to speak and being paid for it, which is fantastic. And if that's the vision that you have, I would cast that vision, but recognize that it's a journey and keep taking those steps forward. Look for those opportunities to speak. Speakers speak. Find that. When you speak, find stories. Look for those. Rick mentioned that at the very beginning. Look for stories. Be an observer of life. Look for those stories that you can capture and use and be able to pull those in and the message that you want to share. And I love how Les Brown says, never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. So I think that's probably the most critical thing. And I think you'll find the opportunities are there. I love the ask question. Normally I ask, and I'm flipping this the other way too, Rick, just real quick. As a speaker, you can tell them, hey, I normally ask for, whatever the amount is, but if you're an event coordinator and you're pulling in something, that's a good question to ask them too. What do you normally ask for in terms of your speaking cost? What's your normal ask? And I think that's a fair way to ask that question too, because understand the event coordinator is probably reluctant to ask the question. So yeah, bunch of tips and challenges there, but I'm just trying to share my stream of conscious. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So for my tip and challenge is going to be the same thing, but I really want to drive on this point of everything's already been said before. The best speakers that I know, what they say on stage comes naturally to them. It's almost easy. Mm-hmm. It's the way. So the stuff that I talk about, and I'll, one of my most famous things that I do is how long does it take to get to work when I'm talking about structured dates, right? And can we do this thing in this certain time? And I always ask people, how long does it take to get to work? Because everybody goes to work and it takes a certain amount. And then I show the variability of that time, right? So what's the longest it's ever taken you? 2 hours. Oh, what happened? There was an ice storm. Okay, so you told me it was every day for 20 minutes, but this time it took 2 hours. You just gave me like a 600% variance. Now you want me to put 20 people into a room who's never done this before and tell you the exact day we're going to be done and we're in trouble. That doesn't make sense, right? So it's learning how to build an analogy, but I naturally process information that way. That's just the way I naturally think. And it comes easy to me to build that analogy. But that is like this groundbreaking thing for so many project managers to hear how to negotiate a date, because they don't think that way. And that's really what we're sharing. What we're sharing is our gift. What was our gift in how to process information, how to internalize information, and what to do with that? That's what a speaker really is doing, is just sharing that natural gift of thought and challenging you in the way you think. So I don't care if it's been said before, and I don't care if it's easy to you. What you're saying and doing is not easy for your audience, and it's an opportunity for you to share your brilliance. Yeah. That is what you really focus on. So don't try to model yourself after somebody else. Don't try to think of like the most impactful thing that you can say. Do what comes naturally to you, because that's what that audience came to hear. That's my tip and challenge, partner.
I like it. I'll just add, by the way, Rick's points are spot on, guys. I'll just add, there's a simple phrase that I try to use every time I speak. And it's just this: speak life. Speak life. You have an opportunity to connect and help and support and encourage somebody. And Step up in there and realize that you get to speak life. So, and that gives me joy to do it. That gets me up on that stage, and it creates the confidence that I want, and helps me connect with the audience. Our podcast, same thing. We're here, Rick and I, we want to speak life into you. Now, we've shared a lot of stuff, but you have the opportunity to speak life as well. And we just want you to do that. So thanks, Rick, for setting this up. Great topic today. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, partner. And you can always find us on breakingaverage.com. Go out there and let us know how you feel about that. If you're taking that leap for that next speech, or if you decide you're going to put that out there, let's make a public commitment to that. Go onto our Twitter, tag me and Paul, and say, hey, listen, I'm in 2023 going to go do my first speech, or in December of 2022, I'm going to go find somewhere to be, whatever that may be. Because if you declare it publicly, and to that end, we're going to make a public commitment here. 2023 is the Breaking Average road trip. Paul and I are going to go find 4 or 5 speaking engagements that we can do, and we're going to road trip it and film a season of behind the scenes of what it's like to be a road trip speaking crew. And our guarantee is to find like the largest ball of twine. I don't know why I'm stuck on that. I've said that 9 times this morning in earlier conversations with Paul, but the largest ball of twine or the biggest rocking chair, whatever that stuff is, we're going to go see along the way, but we're going to go speak life as we actually speak life. So There you go, Paul. There's our commitment.
I love it. I'm in for it. Let's go, man. I don't know what date it's going to be, but we're going to pin down the dates and we're going to make it happen. We're going to set that vision and share that message, and we'll capture it for you guys. It's going to be the Breaking Average road trip. I love it.
Yeah. So stay tuned right here. Stay tuned on the Empowered Living Show on YouTube, on the podcast networks, wherever you see it. And we're going to come at you next week with another how-to. We can't wait to talk to you again. Have a phenomenal day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R² Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.